Hello, everybody. I'd like to call to order the March 22nd meeting for Environmental Matters Committee. And for the record, all the members are present. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. The first item up is
Approval of the minutes.
approval of the minutes from February 9th.
Move approval of the minutes as written.
Was that there?
Yes.
Okay, I second. I read them, but I didn't remember what I was on.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Next up, appointments, but Mr. McCopp is not here, so I would entertain a motion to postpone.
Move to postpone appointment AP 723.
Second?
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, and I move the agenda around a little bit to give presentation, to have a discussion about plastic bag legislation from Allison Colden with the Environmental Commission. And I believe she has given us, where did I put that? Right here.
Madam Chair, is this, Mr. Chair, is this
You did that to me last time.
I'm sorry, I'm so used to it. Is that 1523?
Yes.
Okay.
So you may have seen the county has proposed some legislation, and oh, this is not what I'm looking for. So could you, oh, here it is. All right, could you state your name for the record?
Yes, great to see you all again. Allison Colden, Vice Chair of the Annapolis Environmental Commission.
Your mic's not on, Allison.
What's that?
Your mic's not on.
There we go. Allison Colden, Vice Chair of the Annapolis Environmental Commission.
Thank you. And I believe you're here to talk to us about a summary about the plastic bag legislation that has been passed in various counties in Maryland and different approaches, and Commission has your own recommendations, right?
Yes, yes. Well, thank you for the opportunity to present to you all today. As we discussed at the last meeting, the concept of a plastic bag ban is not a new one to the city. However, we thought that continued discussion about this issue is important, and we put together a summary of some of the lessons learned from municipalities who have already instituted plastic bag fees, bans, or other plastic bag reduction policies for you all to consider. So I'll try to move through these relatively quickly because there are some commonalities across different jurisdictions. So to kick things off, there are several jurisdictions which simply charge a fee for plastic bags. That includes Washington, D.C., as well as Montgomery County. They don't necessarily speak to alternative bags and the use of alternative bags or fees for alternative bags. This is strictly a fee charged for the provision of a plastic bag. In both cases, the retailers retain 1 cent out of each plastic bag that is sold, or the fee from each plastic bag, which is 5 cents in each of those municipalities. Similarly, in Howard County, there was 2020 legislation that was enacted there. There is one additional detail, though, in Howard County where 4 cents is remitted to the county to go to a disposable plastics reduction fund, which, as you can see there, goes to provision of reusable bags, consumer education, stream cleanups, and anti-littering campaigns. Next, we have the category of plastic bag bans. So this is banning the use of plastic bags. Again, not necessarily speaking to the use of alternative bags. Chestertown, Tacoma Park, Westminster, these are ones that also have fines associated with violations. So you can see typically these jurisdictions are charging $100 for the first offense and $200 for a second offense. Westminster also has a $500 fee for a second offense within a 12-month period. These are the ban on single-use plastic bags at the point of sale, And I believe that the fines are against the retailer, not the consumer. The third sort of category, which is one that the commission will recommend to you all, as well as some of the advocates who are active on this issue, is the combination of both a plastic bag ban as well as a fee associated with the use of alternative bags. This is what most of the jurisdictions which have enacted legislation most recently have been doing. Baltimore City instituted this in 2020. Easton in 2022, and there'll be a couple more on a later slide for you all to see that have been more recent than that. Again, this is the ban on single-use plastic bags at the point of sale, but with the addition of a fee charged for the use of an alternative bag, be it compostable, biodegradable, paper, so on and so forth. There are some differences in what is done with those fees across the jurisdictions. For example, in Baltimore City, again, it's a 5-cent fee for the alternative bag with 1 cent remitted to the city and the retailer retaining 4 cents. Others, Easton included, are charging a 10-cent fee, the entirety of which is retained by the retailer. Similarly, Salisbury and College Park, 10-cent fee retained by the retailer, ban on the bags, as well as the fee for alternatives. I've also been pointing out in some of these slides that most of the jurisdictions that have implemented these do have a rollout period. So there's anywhere between 7 to 9 months after the legislation is passed, before the implementation of the bans, to allow retailers as well as consumers to sort of get prepared and have education campaigns to roll out to consumers. Some of them have had longer timelines for implementation. Some of that was due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of them have just, taken a little bit longer to roll out. Baltimore County, this happened pretty recently. I believe it happened last month, it came into effect last month. Again, 5-cent fee on paper bags and a ban at the point of sale. Small businesses in this one were exempted, and bag thickness was included in the definition, which I'll touch on again in the AEC recommendations. So there are other jurisdictions which have legislation that is introduced but in working its way through the process, including Greenbelt, Hyattsville, Frederick City, and, as the chairman mentioned, Anne Arundel County. As well as, I wanted to note that the city council has introduced legislation on this in the past, first in 2007, and then 2 pieces of legislation in 2020, one by the chairman and one by Alderman Schandelmeyer. I'll let the chairman speak to the motivations of the outcome, but my understanding is that, with the COVID-19 pandemic, there was concern at the time about the use of reusable bags, as well as imparting additional burdens on both retailers and consumers during such a challenging time. So both that legislation by Alderman Savage, as well as the other piece of legislation by Alderman Schandelmeyer, were withdrawn in 2020. And to my knowledge, that is the most recent legislation within the city of Annapolis that was introduced. So I mentioned this previously. COVID obviously not only impacted legislation within the city related to this issue, but also in other jurisdictions in terms of the implementation of their policies. There were also some legal considerations. In the staff report, the city attorney mentioned that concerns with the statutory authority to impose a tax, surcharge, or fee related to the bags. We'll go back. Since that time.
Could you go back? I was trying to read what the attorney has said.
Sure, it's up for you now.
So he's suggesting that we have to go to the legislature to get the authority to levy this fee?
Yes, so that was the city attorney's recommendation. Since that time, there has been an opinion handed down by the attorney general saying that there is authority, that they believe that the city has authority to charge a fee for the bags, and I believe Chairman Savage circulated that prior to the March 9th meeting, but we can make sure you have that AG's letter as well to take a look at that. So there's been the AG's opinion that you all do have the authority to do this. And as you can see, several other non-charter jurisdictions have already moved forward with fees as well. So I don't know if they're referencing that AG's opinion in their discussions, but we do have that we can share with you.
I was looking at it, and that's why I was asking to see if this would be addressing what the city attorney has indicated, so,
Yeah, to my knowledge, yes.
thank you.
Did you have a question, Alderman Arnett?
Yes.
So since we have the Office of Law here, in my view, the Office of Law issued an opinion on rent control that said that if any municipality gets it, by inference, all municipalities get it, which seems, I mean, I think that will be tested in court, but it seems like that's an interpretation that's very different from the interpretation that we have to go to the legislature to get approval. So I think there's a matter of consistency here in the rulings that, quite frankly, I think we were a little bit generous in saying if Tacoma Park can do rent control, Annapolis can too. But if that's the case, then it would seem like there would be no question that we can do bag rules, whatever they are, fees or not.
I don't understand fully the basis for the city attorney's opinion here, but I'd be happy to check with see where it's coming from.
Yeah, I think that there have been other questions of consistency across, but I think this is important to sort of nail down as we move forward, because I think there's going to be other things that we're going to want to ban or try to regulate at the city level. So I'm not asking this to be idle or argumentative. I'm serious that we really need to have some sort of a consistency across all of these. I do have a ton of questions about all that was presented, but
Yeah.
I will hold them until it's my turn.
Thank you.
I think there's one more slide, which is just the AEC recommendations. So obviously I am here because we do support legislation being introduced to address plastic bag pollution. It is obviously a problem that has been recognized in the past. I actually went out 2 weekends ago prior to the previously scheduled meeting and just took pictures around the city of where there were plastic bags just floating around. And walking here today from the Gotts Court garage, I actually picked up 2 plastic bags off the sidewalk. So I do think that's an ongoing issue. In looking at the research that we've done, as well as what we've heard from some of the advocates who are active on this issue, we do believe that programs that include both the ban and the fee tend to be more effective in changing consumer behavior. To your point, Alderman Arnett, more recent ones have allowed the retailer to retain the entirety of the fee. One that can avoid the issue of the taxing authority, which was pointed out in the city attorney's report from previous legislation. It can also reduce the overhead for the businesses and just sort of be, kind of a sweeten the deal, if you will. We would like to encourage council to minimize exemptions and include as few as possible, including the ones based on the size or type of business. We've actually heard from Councilwoman Rodvian and the Maryland Retailers Association that the more consistency, the better. The phase-in period we think is important. It can help both consumers and retailers plan for the change, and we have seen that in jurisdictions that have strong public outreach campaigns, it can help people understand the importance of the legislation as well as prepare themselves for implementation. So thanks for the opportunity to present our recommendations.
Thank you very much. And I will open this up to the committee. Any questions? Alderman Arnett?
I'll give it to Alderwoman Lacy, but I have lots of questions.
Well, I have a few. First of all, thank you for gathering all of this. Could you give us a copy or send it to Kaylin and, oh, I didn't see anything attached. It's, maybe it's somewhere else. Okay, well, if I have it, that's great. I want to be clear on how it's working in other jurisdictions. So they charge, in most cases, a 5-cent fee to anyone who wants a plastic bag.
Well, that's one model, yes. That's just the plastic bag fee.
Okay, and if they ask for a paper bag,
There's no charge.
there's no charge. But on several of the others, there was a charge for paper, I thought.
Yes, so that is that is what we, the AEC is recommending. There's a ban on plastic, so outright, no use of plastic, and then a fee for paper or compostable, whatever the alternative is.
Okay. And then, so that's one choice that we have to make, whether to just ban plastic or ban plastic and charge, well, we're going to charge for plastic if they get it, but charge for paper also. Are there different types of plastic that will bear a different value? Because I thought I saw something that said, and I don't know which one it is now, that spoke to a certain type of bag. So will we have to figure out, will somebody have to figure out what kind of plastic they're using and what that fee will be? How does that work?
Yes, so the easiest way to do this is to put in a ban on plastic bags. What I mentioned earlier is there was, I believe it was Baltimore County recently put in one that includes a definition, like a thickness of the plastic, which is in the ban. What has been found is when you include that thickness in the definition of the bag, retailers just find a thicker plastic bag and use that instead. So what we recommend is just banning the single-use plastic bags. And then there is a definition of a reusable bag, because as you know, many of these are made out of plastic as well, or include plastic, but they're much more durable. There is both a definition for the single-use plastic bag as well as the reusable bag that we could provide you all from model ordinance or from previous legislation, which if you do not include the thickness, then it basically gets rid of all of the plastic bags, which I think is the goal, and then defines a reusable bag, which has to do with having the handles that are sewn on, as opposed to just a single piece of plastic that's molded, or frankly, I don't know how they produce those, but it allows you to make that distinction in legislation between the durable reusable bags and the single-use bags.
So that led me to another question, your comments. Plastic bags that are reusable, that they sell in the Giant, and they're plastic. Or they're plastic and something else, maybe plastic coated. How are they classified?
So those would be reusable bags, and they are still allowed to be sold because we want to encourage people to use those bags, which are good for hundreds of uses versus a single-use plastic bag. It is a reduction. We're not completely eliminating the use of plastic in a reusable bag, although if the city wanted to take up this legislation and give out canvas bags for their rollout, that would be fabulous. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's it for now, because I don't remember my other question, so I'll let Alderman Arnett go, and I may have to come back.
So I would like to start out by saying, in my view, over our 16 years, this council has passed a lot of good legislation that has not been enforced. And I believe the reason it hasn't been enforced is because we've never hired the staff. Racine left the room, but we have two people in environment. And so we can pass the best bag legislation in the world. If we're not enforcing it, we haven't done anything. So I say that because I think there is a reason for the city to retain some or all of the fee, but I did want to hear the logic about 10 cents a bag is higher than 5 cents, obviously, and really can add up pretty quickly. I think the last time I was at the Giant, when I let them do the bagging instead of me, I would have come out with 80 cents worth of plastic bags. So that would make me notice more than 40 cents, but nevertheless, I think that there are a couple of different reasons that we would want to think about either a bigger fee and we retain more of it, or some things along those lines, and that is, I would like us to have a lot more people that are going to the stores to check on what kinds of bags, paper, plastic, reusable, and I'd even like to check on the kinds of reusable bags, but that has to have staff, and it has to have the retailers know that there's going to be people checking from time to time, so let's keep this on the up and up. I also, like you and others, particularly when I'm out in the water and I see, is that a jellyfish? No, it's giant. So I think that there could be some redoubled efforts to go around all of our streets and waterways and start collecting these things, these plastic bags, and that costs money and takes staff as well. So I would like to think about the use of the legitimate use. We can charge a fee if we can show that it is covering the city costs and a reserve. So it can be city costs plus a 5% reserve, and we do that in a number of cases. So I would like to see the city have some share of the fee. Now, what I really wanted to ask you is, other than just, I guess you said a sweetener, I think bribe, getting the retailers to go along because it's an extra 10 cents, why are we letting them keep that fee? It doesn't make much sense to me.
So I think the idea is, and again, this gets to, exemptions for small retailers versus large retailers and so on and so forth. One of the reasons why, folks are supportive of having a fee that is the same across all size of businesses is, if you didn't do that and the large retailers can afford to provide bags for free, as opposed to the smaller retailers, the mom and pop shops can't afford that additional overhead. So it kind of creates an equal playing field across all different types of retailers and all different size of retailers. Because I do think, the retaining of the fee is intended to, provide a little bit of that overhead funding for the smaller businesses that would provide either reusable bags or paper, which I believe are more expensive than the single-use plastic.
So I think we should have stopped plastic bags in 2007. One of the complicating factors is Sam Shropshire was using a lot of research that it turns out was coming from universities in Sweden, and it turns out Sweden's biggest single product is wood pulp going into plastic bags, amongst other things. And so there was a lot of counter research questioning. And there is, paper production is almost as heinous as plastic production. All the diazinon and all the other things that they pump right in to the stream or river where the pulp plant is. So I'm no big fan of paper either. I do like banning plastic and having a fee on paper. And I kind of like the idea of the Savage legislation. But we can get into the details of the legislation. I like all of your recommendations. I think that is going to be a question of how long a rollout period we allow for the adjustment. I'm sure we will have a number of lobbyists in here at the council meetings, as we did before. And it will be good to see some old lobbyist friends, but nevertheless. So like Alderwoman Finlayson, I want to thank you for the report, the thoroughness. I see some things that we can copy, but the last point, Can you recite off the top of your head what the county's thinking about? Because I do like that idea of consistency across jurisdictions. Or maybe we can get the county to change to a more rightful or righteous,
So I just moved this forward because I do believe that the county is proposing the same as Salisbury, which is the ban and the 10-cent fee retained by the retailer for alternative bags. I will, if I'm wrong on that, I will follow up with you and double check. But that had just been introduced on the 6th of March, right before your last meeting, so I hadn't actually updated this presentation with the Anne Arundel County legislation at that point. But I do think it's in an email, but I will re-forward that to you all.
okay. Are we going to have American Petroleum Institute chemist in here talking about the difference between single-use and multi-use plastic? I mean, to me, reusable does have a sewn-on handle, has a certain capacity. Trader Joe's are pretty. Actually, so are Grawls. But they're not really, in my mind, there's some plastic coating, but they're not plastic like single-use. But I think we're going to have to be really tight on our definitions, or where there's going to be all kinds of loopholes and delays and so forth. Well, again, I want to thank you for your work. I'm excited about it, and I'm raring to go.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. And we're happy, if any other questions come up, obviously happy to answer them.
Do you have any questions?
My other question had to do with the fee and how it was divided, and who was going to handle that. And Alderman Arnett touched.
doing it all.
And she doesn't have anything else to do, does she? You know, and I was sitting here writing a note to Cynthia about legislation that would add a staffing impact note to all legislation. Because we tend to create, you'll get that momentarily. Because we keep adding wonderful things, but we forget we don't add the people to do the additional work. You know, and our staff will step up and try to do it all, but that's not fair. And a equitable and efficient way of doing it. So, but I would be willing to sponsor this, co-sponsor it also, I suspect them. I think we could sponsor it as a committee.
Good.
Yeah, that's one.
Would it be appropriate, I think. We just have to work out some of the nuances of it, but I think with your help, we can
Yeah.
easily do that.
And if I could respond to that really quickly with respect to, we are obviously very sensitive to the staff impacts and everybody's capacity and workload. And I think you can try and minimize the impact as much as possible through the legislation that you all craft. If it's very clear that plastic bags are banned, you know, that makes it very clear that if anybody, any consumer walks into a retailer who is handing out plastic bags, then they are in violation. And we could, you know, I don't know if there's an existing avenue that we could use for reporting or something like that. But if you make it very clear and minimize as much as possible all the exceptions to the rule, and then helping with the rollout as well. Obviously, that's going to take some staff time, but the more straightforward, you know, the legislation is written with respect to what is in and what is out, what is allowed and not allowed. I think that'll help minimize the amount of enforcement action that's needed, because it'll be very clear and very easy for even residents to sort of keep an eye on.
Well, then that raises another question. One of them indicated, accessibility challenges as an exception. What does that mean? That sounds kind of arbitrary to me.
It wasn't an exception. It was that either some jurisdictions have chosen to distribute bags to low-income residents, those who are on SNAP or other benefits. Some have chosen to distribute reusable bags to, frankly, I would have to go back and ask or look at what was considered an accessibility challenge in Salisbury. But point being is that they didn't want this to be a burden on low-income residents, and so there was different approaches to how those communities were identified, or which communities were targeted prior to the rollout or the implementation date for distribution of reusable bags. But I feel like that's something that could possibly in the city, with lots of events that are already going on with our communities that could be incorporated into prior to the start date of a ban, would be distributing reusable bags so that the purchase of a reusable bag is not a burden on those who are already, challenged in that way.
And this could be an opportunity for the local businesses to become good partners in the community and provide the appropriate bags to their constituents.
Yeah, and we've got one of our AEC members who's already been scouring the internet for the cheapest bulk reusable bags, and I think he found one for $1.45. So we're getting there.
The other question was about the fee. Some jurisdictions keep the entire fee. I assume to cover their cost, and then others give back to the jurisdiction.
Give
A
back to
penny
the-
or two.
To the
days.
retailers.
Yeah.
The retailers.
Yes, so some of them do retain the fee for some of the same sort of activities that Alderman Arnett was suggesting, stream cleanups, education. None of them specifically listed whether they were using staff times to support these things, but I would assume to implement those types of programs they would be. But that's typically what they're using. Again, if the fee is related to a service, that the city is providing, I think that's, and the chairman's legislation in 2020, I think, was designed in that way too, where the fee was in the watershed, was directed to the Watershed Restoration Fund for the purposes of reducing plastic pollution.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I have a couple questions.
Oh, okay.
So I think this is really going to be kind of the first in a series of meetings, because I think we're going to have more conversation about what direction to go. It sounds like there's consensus on the committee, at least having some kind of fee. But I think one of the things we dig into is, would we take the county approach and just have them, the grocer, the retailer, pay the fee and keep the money? And or do we want to take the fee? So what I proposed with, and this is 0920, which is the one that I had introduced with
Tierney, Arnett, Gay, and
Yeah.
Rodriguez.
Yeah, so that one, we actually had, it was 20 cents, and it was half the fee would go to the retailer, half would go to the city. And so, but I think in order to answer that question, we would have to get finance office in here, because one of looking, and I have to review the supporting documentation again, but there's a fiscal note, impact note from the finance office last time talking about it. It was really hard for them to, they weren't able to quantify how much we would collect in fees. So I think we need to do some more research in that regard, as far as how much money have these other jurisdictions brought in and what have they used it for, the ones that have charged a fee, because that may help them estimate. Because what the finance office ended up saying is that they also weren't clear on whether or not it would require a new staff position to collect the fee and do whatever finance needs to do when they collect a fee. And so I think we need to kind of ask them how difficult that would be to collect. And so obviously another part of that was I think that was one of the reasons why the way I proposed it last time was that we only had it applied to businesses that were retail businesses that were over 20,000 square feet. So the larger businesses, the grocery stores for the most part, and probably hardware stores.
Yeah, but a turtle choking on a plastic bag doesn't care what
Yeah.
retailer.
Right, but I think so. But that's one of the things I think we need to work on, because if that's a way of making it more manageable for finance, you may want to consider that. And I think at the time, the other rationale was not to burden some of the smaller businesses on Main Street However, we are getting recommendations, I believe, from the commission that it applied to all retailers, right?
Yeah, and that's, from my understanding, conversations with Councilwoman Rodvian, who's sponsoring the Anne Arundel County legislation. That is the position that the Retailers Association supports as well.
They really? Okay.
We should have a joint meeting with the county council on this, or at least Lisa.
Yeah.
She's shown a penchant for coming here to talk to us on 040. Let's get her to come back and talk to us on bags.
Yeah, we'll have to give that some more thought. That's an idea. Okay, so we need more discussion about the fee. I'll make a note to invite the finance department. So again, that's one question we have to figure out. Do we collect, which businesses do we collect the fee from? Is it going to be split 50-50 with the city, some of it kept by the retailer, and get our heads around how that would be managed? The other part that we had a question with last time, and Ms. Hodo may remember some of this, had to do with enforcement. Is we did task at the time enforcement with, I think that we had the Office of Environmental Policy at the time, with that office. And I'd have to read through again to see how rigorous the enforcement was. It may have just been based on complaints or occasional spot checks. But I think it's good to have that sorted out as far as how we would deal with that. And also if there's going to be any kind of fine. I think we did have a fine written in here as well for businesses who just refuse to comply. And the other question would be how to handle paper bags. And I think, if I heard you correctly, the commission's recommending that paper bags just have a fee, not a ban, right?
Right.
And so the other thing to throw out there, I guess, is what was proposed last time was similar. They could have paper, and I think they had a fee, but we're going to allow paper bags only that had recycled post-consumer
40% or more recycled content. Yeah.
Do you have a recommendation on that?
Well, we didn't specifically discuss that within the commission. My understanding was that that's the majority of paper bags that are out there now. So if that were something, if that were not the case, if we go back and research that, I don't think it obviously wouldn't be a negative in my mind to add into the legislation, but my understanding was that most of the paper bags, at least in the large retailers now, do meet that standard. But if not, I believe that's something the commission would support as well.
But are there degradability rates that vary depending upon the paper?
Probably. I know they have that for various plastic bags, and I can't recall what we did with if we were allowing compostable plastic bags or not. I know there was a lot of discussion with Ms. Guild about that.
No, and I believe, again, we discussed this a little bit, but I think biodegradable and compostable bags would still fall under the single-use plastic bag, just because they, even under the definition of compostable and biodegradable, it only requires, I believe that, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it still allows a certain percentage of the plastic to persist after it breaks down, which then creates microplastics.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. All right. I think those are the main points. And so maybe we can chat about how to proceed. As a committee, it might be good if we can get our heads around what exactly to recommend. I guess at this point, if you could bring some of that back to the commission, and if you had any additional information you could provide on those things, we will hear that at the next meeting, and we can move. Does the committee think it'd be a good idea to invite finance department?
Well, I was going to ask you about that. First of all, I am totally sympathetic with Alderwoman Finlayson's point that we keep adding requirements but not adding staff. But this doesn't necessarily have to be done by our staff. If there are some environmental entrepreneurs out there that we could put under contract to do these collections, and maybe we pay them by the weight of the plastic retrieved, whatever it is. But that would mean we'd still have to have a project officer on a contract. But the other beauty of that is if the contractor isn't doing a good job, we can terminate the contract at the convenience of the government and get another one. But I think that if it's not going to be contracted out, it would seem like this would go to Public Works somehow, maybe under a refuse
I
collection.
think the stormwater group.
Yeah, it could be a stormwater.
It's a good question. I'm not quite sure. I think we could possibly have a contract out to a third party, some group, maybe even a group like the Sierra Club or, I don't know, Watershed might be willing to do the occasional inspections and then just let the city know if there are violations, and then and then I guess the other question would be the fee, having some of the fee to go towards obviously the bag production, like I think the Alderman said, but also go towards cleanups.
I also think we need to be thinking about the fines,
Yeah.
because $100 might not be very dissuading. One of the things we have on the universal form is that it could be $100 per incident, or it could be $100 per day, or it could be $100 and you must appear in court. Now, I'm sure the Office of Law would like more on their docket, but the checking it off per day and appear in court really did seem to be very effective. I'm thinking of some landlords that weren't keeping up their property, and once that you must appear in court, boy, first of all, the property was cleaned up quickly. Second, it was sold quickly to a new owner. So that one, we can have some impact that way. But again, it takes management. So even if we contract it out, somebody on staff has got to be overseeing this as another one of their jobs. So we got to pay attention to that.
Yeah, and that has to be rolled into the fee. So I guess if you can get us any information from other jurisdictions, that would be
May I add
wonderful
one
to
other
have.
thing?
Yes.
The effective date. How much time should we allocate for compliance? You know, for
Compliant.
compliance, how much time?
Oh, yeah.
You know, do we put it in effect? I just saw someplace a year in Westminster gave their businesses a year to comply. But that's something we'd like a recommendation on also.
Okay.
So I think we're pretty close to getting, I think there's consensus on the fee. The only question is if we split it. What was the recommendation again from the commission as far as the fee? Recommendation from the commission on collecting
On collecting versus on the retailer versus
just the
city?
retailer or split?
So I believe we would support the city retaining part of that fee. It's just we don't, the legal issues were not something
Yeah.
that we had the expertise to weigh in on.
Okay.
So
All right.
anything that helps booster the Watershed Restoration Fund gets a thumbs
Yeah.
up.
Well, and if we can actually pay
Or
a
enforcement,
group
yeah.
to help to use that money to pay for cleanups, that'd be great as well.
That Alderman Savage ordinance was pretty good looking.
Yeah. It took a lot of work. I was kind of sad to have to withdraw it after all that work, but such is life. All right. So, again, I think we're pretty close. It sounds like, I think the committee is good with the recommendation from the commission to have it apply to all the retailers. It sounds like we're good with having it apply, your recommendation regarding the paper bags. So just put a fee on the paper. And if you could, another request, I guess, for the commission, did you look at the specific exemptions? Because there were a number of exemptions last time for fresh meat products,
Dry cleaning,
dry cleaning, ice bags.
alcohol. Yeah, so we didn't actually directly compare that across jurisdictions, but we can do that if that's something you're interested in.
Yeah, because otherwise we'll probably just take what was written last time. So if you have any comments on what was proposed.
Yeah, I think the only thing about last time is, well, again, we'll look at the whole list, but
Okay.
last time, one that was unique about Annapolis is it was exempting the farmers markets. And I think that our recommendation would be to not exempt the farmers markets. I feel like most people who are at a farmers market are probably bringing a reusable bag anyway, so.
Okay. Anything else from the? oh, yes.
Well, I don't
Alderwoman.
recall the specifics to your previous legislation, but did we have a fiscal impact note on, I assume we did, but what did it take into consideration? Because I feel like we're hearing some new, like dry cleaners, how are they impacted?
Well, this would, the original proposal was to exempt
To exempt,
those bags from dry cleaners. And a
what
couple,
are the choices if we did not exempt those bags?
and that may be worth more discussion to find out from those companies if there is an alternative.
That is one of the
know.
common exemptions across some of the jurisdictions is dry cleaning. The other one, which I would love to see removed, but is like a produce bag. So, you know, the thinner plastic bags in the produce section. But again, we can look at those across the jurisdictions and see. We'd just like to see the council minimize as much as possible those exemptions, again, to try and make it as straightforward and enforceable as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much
Thanks.
for the time. All right. Thank you, colleagues. And, and we did get notice, we'll have a fourth co-sponsor. Sounds like. Probably five. I think we'll have a lot of the council
Who was
support
the
this
fourth?
idea. Alderman Gay.
Oh,
I don't know, Alderman Schandelmeyer is the one who proposed one also most
are
recently.
they watching? Is that how they?
I don't know if Schandelmeyer was, but I guess Alderman Gay maybe. All right, moving on to, what would we have on here next? 05522. I'm sorry, 05222. Oh, so did you have time to, well, I'd like to, do you have time to stay for the entire meeting? Yes. Okay. Because I'd like to get some of the legislation worked on. So 05222, do we have anybody from Public Works in case we have questions? But I can, okay, let me give you a summary on 052. This is the turtle curb legislation. And I've had a couple meetings with Public Works about this, and what we realized through, and I had thanks to our wonderful GIS department, they put together a map showing what areas would be impacted. And it became apparent that this really was, the legislation as written was really impacting too many areas. And we were talking about I'm going to pick on Eastport a little bit. And just to say, it didn't really seem to make too much sense to put all this curb in Eastport when they really don't have too much natural shoreline left.
As I told you, we eat all the turtles we can find.
Yeah, sure. So I got to looking at how to refine it in scope. And what I came up with is basically having a 250-foot buffer around the resource conservation area, which is part of the critical area. And the areas in gray would be the areas of the city that would be impacted. And the different colors on there are, let's see, the red are the non-arterial roadways, which are the roads that that I'm proposing would be impacted. And that totals non-arterial roadway, you'll see in the top right, 61,000 feet of non-arterial roadways. And not all that road has curbing, and so the yellow line actually shows the curbing, existing curbing that is located in these areas on non-arterial roadways. And that amounts to 45 roughly 46,000 feet of sidewalk. And so, if you remember, this legislation does two things. The first is this would apply the standard to all new construction within these areas. And that was kind of the easier part of this. The second part, which I think the committee asked about a couple meetings ago, was how is this going to impact existing curb? Are we going to have some kind of program to transition curb to the new turtle-friendly curbing? And I can give you the language that I'd come up with as a sponsor through discussions with Public Works. But I guess first of all, does the committee have any question about the scope of the potential impacted areas?
I do. I don't understand. I'm looking at the shaded areas, which are the buffers. And there are sidewalks within the buffer areas?
Yes, those are the existing sidewalks. The yellow lines.
Yeah, so I'm looking at my ward, and this is the residential area. This goes beyond the residential area. There's no houses back there. So I'm not sure why there's a sidewalk that goes back there.
In Kingsport,
Yeah. And the same thing with over here. There's nothing here.
I think, Ms. Wampler, if you could join us, I think the yellow is all existing. So I think that must be where there are currently houses. How did you determine that layer? If you could comment on.
Are houses in the buffer area?
Yeah, so the gray area is not necessarily the buffer, it just means it's 250 foot from the buffer.
Okay.
It's still potentially in the critical, well, it's all within the critical area here, but the RCA is the resource conservation area, it's a subset of the critical area. And
So the sidewalks that are on that map are what I pulled from our aerial photography, and where a contractor determined there were existing sidewalks for the whole city, and then I just clipped the sidewalks that fell within that buffer.
So even though it doesn't look as if there are houses
Right.
there.
There could be
There-
sidewalk.
there.
I mean, if there's areas that you're questioning, I can go back and look and see if maybe there's an error, but they're usually pretty good about that.
I'm just looking at the area in the community of Kingsport, and it appears that there are no houses, but there are sidewalks that go beyond, the regular streetscape.
yeah, I think what might be look confusing is that maybe if we show the,
Alderman, in
Yes.
Kingsport, there's a trail system that runs through the community property and also runs down to Crab Creek. So that very well may be what you're seeing there.
This appears to be right here.
That's down to the community
He's talking
pier.
about over
Yeah.
here is the community pier. I'm talking about.
I think
on
what's
this side.
confusing here is the gray area doesn't necessarily represent the resource conservation area, it includes it. But for example, I think that might be one thing we could show. Well, actually, do you have access? Could you show the resource conservation areas on?
I would just need 1 minute. but I
Okay,
can.
okay. So for example, over here, this is Rocky Gorge. It's all green at the time.
And here's Rocky Gorge right here. Not in the conservation area. Rocky Gorge is right here.
Or you can look at this would be,
Down here?
my community is right here, so you include the gray area. We have a resource conservation area along the shoreline, but if you go 250 feet out, that's why it includes some of the community.
Okay.
But our curb is already the turtle-friendly curb, and so it's not marked. That's-
And she's good. She can just pull it up on the screen and everything.
She knew exactly what to do.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Bryce, you'll see the map that when she pulls it up, or what I'm talking about. Kingsport and Annapolis Walk.
Yeah, so that you can see, Alderman, that shows the three different designations in the critical area. You have the IDA, which is the intense development area, the LDA, which is the low development area, and then the RCA, which is the resource conservation area. And so just for example, most of Eastport's probably IDA. So that's why I was focusing on the RCA, which is usually forested for the most part. And so that's why the buffer I wanted to have be near these forested areas or wetland areas where we know the turtles would be anyway.
So where is the area in question?
Near Kingsport.
That's Hunt
Sit
Meadows.
down. What's that road that goes into Kingsport?
Here's Kingsport
Bywater Road?
right here. Bywater Road, Greenbrier.
You go to the west more. A little more. There it is. Can you go a little more? There's Kingsport.
Yeah.
So you'll see the RCA area right to the left.
Right here.
And so the 250 would be from that edge of the blue. So that's why you're seeing it go into a little bit into 250 feet into Kingsport.
So the question of the sidewalk is here?
It appears as if the sidewalk goes behind that row of houses. Or maybe it's just the map that I'm looking at. But yeah, you're on Hardwood and I forgot the Banneker, I think it is.
Yeah.
So it's those sidewalks there, not, it just appears that the sidewalks are behind that row of houses, but that's not what.
Alderwoman, it's been a long time since I've been out there. We did the final inspection out there, and we walked around a lot of area out there. I believe that there is a trail that runs behind all of those houses and then runs around it, ultimately crosses over
There is a trail.
What used to be, it's an asphalt trail, what used to be, Bywater Road, and then runs down past their stormwater management pond, behind their stormwater management pond, and also runs down to their water access on Crab Cove.
There's no question, there is a trail. I don't
Yeah.
think it goes as far back into that area.
I think this is that.
Because I've dealt with the two houses, you could see that kind of sit way back down that road off of Banneker.
Banneker Lane, there are two, what are
There's
referred to as
two-
estate lots.
Yeah, because we've
back
been dealing
there.
with them with refuse pickup.
Well, the yellow you see here, I think, is on that road
Right, that's what I
to
was
the left.
inquiring about. That's exactly,
So that's the yellow.
yeah, so there are houses there. This appears.
The houses
as if-
just aren't shown in the.
Okay,
in
I
the
just want
overlay.
to have the right frame of reference.
We could.
Um,
I'm sure Ms. Walter could just turn up the transparency on that, so you could see it.
Okay.
Oh, on the,
Well, this doesn't have the
Do you have-
boundaries,
do you have the layer for the-
sidewalks and
yeah, I'll have to,
The
go
buffer?
into another system for that.
yeah. I'm good now. I just wanted to make sure
Oh, okay.
I was
And it
looking
could
at
be
the right
that if
thing.
they picked up
Your
the
mic's
trail thinking it
Can you
was,
Your
turn your
mic's
mic
not on?
they may have picked up a trail thinking it was a sidewalk.
Yeah,
So I'll look at that.
okay.
So that's one big, I think, question as far as scope. The other question I wanted to touch on is the applicability. So again, it applied to new construction, which I think everybody, for the most part, was good with. The other question is how to handle new conversion of existing curb. And so after we had a couple meetings and we basically came down to, there were concerns about replacing sidewalk piecemeal, and it didn't really make sense to do that in a community. And so what we ended up discussing was basically if an entire block, equivalent of a block, would be impacted, which is, what would we say, 400 feet, Mr. Bryce? I think, yeah, 400. So this is when developing a street replacement. This is on page, I haven't given this to you yet, sorry. Page 3. You have curb replacement, page 3, and then line 31. When developing a street replacement program, which is the repaving program, the director shall require existing curb to be replaced with turtle-friendly curbs where existing curbing meets the following conditions. One is more than one block long or a section of at least 400 feet. And then on the next page, just mentions how the director may waive the requirement in the interest of public safety or other mitigating circumstances, because Mr. Bryce and I think Director Jarrell both had, I think, good reasons for why this may not make sense. I think Mr. Bryce brought up Truxton Park in particular. So
Correct.
I thought this would be a nice way to give them the ability to make those changes. So that's basically what it came down to. And the amendment, just last thing, sorry, is just the amendment is basically an entire rewrite. Is that right, Ms. Ruther? As proposed, this is just swapping it. It basically is entirely rewrite for the legislation. So any questions from the committee? I see Alderman Arnett hopping in his chair.
Two questions, and I'm glad Mr. Bryce is here. I want to make sure we don't have unintended consequences. So I noticed that if you're sort of in the middle of the map, it's where Eastport Terrace and Harbor House are. Is there any anticipation that this could somehow impact the Choice Neighborhood Program in any adverse way?
I would not think so, but I think we would need to look at that as we look at the plans. I think we have a meeting coming up to discuss some of that redevelopment in the short term.
The new section in the legislation that gives the director the ability to waive could be something if we run into a difficulty. I think we want the Choice Neighborhood Program to succeed. And but that is an area down there where there's a lot of shoreline, and you would think there would be a lot of potential turtle activity.
I would think that when we look at these areas, unless there is some concern that is, for example, when we talk about Harbor House and Eastport Terrace, I think that unless there's a specific concern raised by others, as an example, perhaps the police department, just that they are concerned that having a mountable curb would create more of a hazard in that area because of the children and the density of that area would raise a concern that not having a normal barrier curb could pose a problem. I don't see why we would not proceed with that. But if there was a safety concern raised, I think we would look towards that.
So I'm glad you used the term mountable, because that's my other question, going back to page 2 where we're defining the curbs. It seems to me that A and C are sufficient, but an angled curb could be a 90-degree angle, right?
Well, the way I interpreted this is that there are several alternative curbs that would meet that. One would be kind of an OG type curb, which kind of a curved curb. The other would be an angled mountable curb, similar to what is in Alderman Savage's ward. I don't, as you've heard me say, I don't particularly like the mountable curb because it tends to cause problems with vehicles trying to go over top of it. But where you're simply looking at that as a run, without entrances without driveways, I don't see a problem doing that. It may also become necessary if we go to a mountable curb, would be to say, yes, you can use a mountable curb in this location. However, at the driveways, you have to put in standard driveway entrances.
So what is the difference? Is an angled curb not mountable? I guess I'm just,
And I think we're getting into kind of
yeah. well,
layman
that's why it
versus
seems to me-
engineer. So
Yeah.
the mountable curbs is a curb that you can drive over top of.
Right.
You would anticipate that mountable curb being the normal 6-inch or 8-inch height, depending upon whether you're dealing with state, county, or city, because the state tends to use a much higher curb than the city does. The driveway entrances are also mountable, but instead of having a 6-inch height at the back portion of it, it has a 2-inch height or a 1.5-inch height, so you can drive over that, and then you have the longer taper to get back to your.
Yeah, that's how mine
drive.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, well, I won't quibble. It just seemed to me like it's either mountable or something that would allow turtles to negotiate it.
And I think the other thing, as you look at the constructability of these, when you look at the bigger developments, they do not go in and put curb in with forms anymore. They do it with a curb machine. So what you kind of look for is what is the standard template that they have used before, and it actually works, the last thing you want to do is bring in a new template that they may have problems with.
All right, I'm going to stay away from the engineering, but it just,
You sounded pretty good to me, without a degree. May I ask a question? Mr. Bryce, did I understand you to say that it was a safety issue in Harbor House and Eastport Terrace?
Now, what I was saying was, if there is a concern that is raised, for example, if someone raises the concern that because you don't have a 90-degree barrier curb, and instead you have an angled curb, that vehicles would be more prone to drive off of the roadway, drive and park on top of the sidewalks, particularly if you were dealing with children in the area, then, if we got that kind of feedback, we would then potentially look at using the standard barrier curb. But until we've kind of looked at it and gotten feedback from others, I don't see a reason we would not be going to a mountable curb. Now, let me mention this because this could become an issue and again, I haven't looked at these plans yet, but if you come in and you put a mountable curb along the curb and along the roadway edge and you wrap that around, and now you have a parking area, and you put the mountable curb in the parking area up against the houses, what you may also have to do then is put parking bumpers in, because, some people drive up to the curb, the curb stops the car, they have the overhang onto the sidewalk. Well, if you have a mountable curb, they're going to drive up on the sidewalk. So we may have to be looking at changing some of the way we do business with that mountable curb within the sidewalk. The other thing you may also want to think about, and this I don't think is necessarily something for you necessarily think about. I think this is much more for us to think about. As you talk about turtles trying to get back to the lower areas, to the marshy areas, you may ask yourself the question, do I need that along the street? Because they're not necessarily going to be out at the street. Is it a better place to have it back in the parking lots, because that's where you're going to start to move back towards the wetlands areas. But again, that's just something that as we were talking, kind of came to my mind, because Alderman Arnett, you had brought up back at Harbor House. So again, I think you have the general guidance, the ordinance that you're proposing. You may need to look at this, or we may need to look at this more on a case-by-case basis to make sure what we're implementing is what you're looking to have implemented, while not creating another hazard.
So last two questions is DPW basically happy with the changes?
Yes.
Is the sponsor happy with or more importantly, is your son happy with the change?
Yes, yeah.
And when I come in with my armadillo legislation, will this be?
Well, I think the situation with armadillos is that they roll anyway, so they can kind of roll up the curb. Are you telling me you're a Texas Aggie? Is that what you're saying?
Last time you've seen an armadillo in Maryland, right?
I'm trying to introduce them. I'm raising them in my
They're going to
backyard.
be on the boatyard menu here soon. Well, and to Mr. Bryce's last point, there is language in here that the department can require that these curbs be put in other places. If that, like, for example, you mentioned parking lots. The legislation is focused on streets, but parking lots were touched on, but not focused on. But I think that's good for, any other questions from the committee?
No, I'm good.
Is it appropriate to make a motion that we recommend favorably this substitute ordinance to the city council?
Yes, is there a second
I would
on
make,
that?
I would make,
The motion is to
recommend favorably.
recommend favorable the amendment, Amendment 1. Is that what we're doing?
Yes.
Right.
And this is all Amendment 1, all 3 pages, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Yes, I'll second.
All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you, Mr. Bryce. I think we
You're quite welcome.
good piece of
And
legislation.
Sean.
And Sean, thank you for all your map work.
Lady with the magic fingers, man. She got the
Yes,
screen
okay.
working and everything.
And may I wish you all a happy Maryland Day.
Well, thank you. That's Friday,
I'm
right?
very glad to see the city still celebrates this. I think it's very unfortunate that the county and the state have stopped celebrating the founding of our state.
I just.
I agree.
something.
And, all right, so next piece legislation, thank you for waiting. Ms. McKeown, if you could join us, and Ms. Hodo, you want to? Oh, not you, okay. I thought I saw your hand. You're welcome to join us for this. So next up is 05522. This is the sediment control, and similar to the last piece, I did sit down, we had a number of meetings with Public Works, because originally, as written, there were some concerns. I have too many pieces of paper up here. All right, so there were some concerns. I'm going to hand out a summary of some of the changes we made through our discussions with Public Works. And so the bullets, the black is what was done originally. The red are some of the changes that we've made from the original legislation. So just to highlight this, in the second bullet, it talks about requiring inspections of receiving waters.
Alderman, where did these fit into the ordinance? I'm looking at the ordinance.
I will need to look that up. You want me to go bullet by bullet?
I would just like to be able to read them into where they go
Okay,
in
sorry.
the legislation.
Here's the amendment packet, and
Oh,
you can
okay.
follow along
Okay,
with where those changes are in that packet. And so I can go through, there are 12 amendments. Do you want me to go through each of the amendments?
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, that's one voice.
That's fine. So Amendment 1, let's see. I need to bring up my copy of legislation here.
I mean, if they're just editorial changes, you don't, I mean,
Yeah, some of them are. I'm sorry, you can
First of all,
flip on the next, later on in the packet, you'll see the changes in the legislation itself.
oh, okay.
But the overall is that these are changes that you discuss with Public Works and they're
Yes.
happy with it and you're happy with it.
So, yeah, so to highlight one of the changes is regarding the receiving waters inspections. There were some questions about, because the way it was written was that I think it would have required inspectors to go out every inspection. And so that really ended up being, oh, it's a new ring.
It's not mine this
It's
time.
from Harry Bosch. It's soulful. Sorry.
Sorry. So as originally written, it would have required inspections of receiving waters after every inspection. And so when we talked about that, it really didn't make much sense. It would have been too burdensome. And so the amendment would change it that they would only need to inspect receiving waters after storm events. And
Is that after an inch and a half?
yeah, so that's what you're seeing
So
there.
I'm on page 2.
Realized that we needed a definition of rain event, which is
Okay.
more than
So
half an
that's
inch of
the
rainfall.
definition.
And then you'll also see in red, okay, so then on the next, I'm on
The
page
next
numbers
one
on
is the
this. In
requirement.
section B, inspection frequency, you'll see that receiving waters as defined should be inspected by the department after rainfall events. And so that means, whenever the inspector's out there,
So we reduced the frequency from twice a week to once a week?
well, so as the current standard is once every 2 weeks, and that comes from the state legislation. I was originally proposing twice a week. Did I phrase that right? Every other week, every 2 weeks is how the state law
Okay.
requirement. I was originally proposing twice a week, but again, that proved to be, I think, too burdensome. And so we scaled that back to once a week, and that's for larger project sites. For the smaller sites, like an individual house, that still would be at the 2 week standard.
So the state standard is every 2 weeks, and we're changing ours to every week.
Yes.
Once a week.
For the big sites.
For the larger sites.
Right.
And the ones that are actively,
So how doable is that for you?
It's doable,
It's doable.
yes.
Okay. Again, staff is
Yeah.
what I'm thinking about.
yep.
So, okay.
Yeah, and that's really what's driving a lot of these changes, is to make it more manageable. I am just reading this, though. I do think I might want to tweak the language regarding rainfall events. Because it still says, so for every active site, it's saying that receiving waters shall be inspected by the department after rainfall events. I think we could still narrow that down in scope.
We've just defined rainfall events as 1.5
Yeah, we don't get,
inches.
these days, I mean, how frequently do we get those rain events? Maybe, that's a decent sized storm, probably 1 or 2 a month, maybe? What do you think?
I guess we could, I have to think about that a little bit more, Chairman, because within what time frame, perhaps we could try and do the weekly inspection at the same time.
Well, that's what I think we should maybe be reworded as, to say something along the lines of when, unless Ms. Ruther, you think this is already implied, but when doing the weekly inspections, that at the same time, the receiving waters will be inspected when there's a storm event, half-inch storm event as defined.
Yeah, that works for me.
I think that's already implied, though. Okay, I think I'm overthinking this, I believe. All right, so that was the one another change. Going down the bullet, originally I was proposing that the project plans be posted on the site in a publicly accessible area. But the question ended up coming up, well, a lot of times these project sites are locked, you can't get in. And so that's when compromise, which I think was a good idea, was we'll just say that have to put the plans online. So presumably they'll be posted on our new track it system once that gets worked out, and public will be able to go on there and view the plans.
So where would the notification as to where the plans are located be located?
Well,
How will they know
the
to go
permits
to-
have to be posted near the entrance. Anyway,
But when
right?
you're going online, how do you find it?
But
On
you're
our
saying to
website.
go online now, so will
Yeah.
that be posted there also?
Is that under planning and zoning?
No, I think that'd be, well, maybe. I guess that might be a staff question as far as, how would you implement that? Would you put something on the grading permit that would say clearly, here's the permit number, here's how to access the plans?
So normally when I go on, I go to planning and zoning, and you go to projects, and you can look it up by the project number or the address, or there's 4 or 5 ways you can look it up. How would we be able to look this up in 1708-080?
In my limited knowledge of EnerGov, it's far easier to search. So I think what I will need to do is strategize on how we're going to search, how we're going to advise the public on how to search on EnerGov. So let me ask some other people on their thoughts on that. Because I think you're right, we need to make that very obvious for everyone, the public.
And I don't think that's necessarily something we need to include in
Not in
this,
the legislation,
but
I think in
just as far as
Yeah.
regulation, internal policy. The other big change from as originally written, is the last bullet in red. Corrective action. Originally, it was stated as 36 hours, but what we talked about was having it be 3 business days instead, because weekend may cause a delay to meet in 36 hours. So those are some of the changes from the original. I don't know if there are any questions.
I have a question about the milestones. This is new, I guess?
Is that under D?
So
Are you looking at D?
I'm on page
There's no
3 or 4 of the actual legislation. No.
1708-080D?
Yeah, this,
D?
yeah.
I'm looking at the wrong thing because it doesn't have, it's under inspection frequency.
Mhm.
And there's 2 new, or I don't know whether it's 2 new. Milestones shall be determined by the department as important phases of construction. Each milestone in the approved inspection schedule shall require milestone inspection by the department. So I'm asking the question, is these milestone inspections a new addition? It's kind of redundant. A new step in the process? Or have we been doing milestone inspections and we're just giving them a time?
Our milestone inspections are less formal. This revision would be a new process.
Okay. So is it doable?
With existing staff, likely no. So my vision is to hire a consultant to help.
So is that stated in the fiscal impact note?
Yes, so the impact note, there's an updated note. Let me see if it's posted. It might be attached to the fee. There's a resolution that's going to be proposed fee, which I think was what, $200 or so per inspection, milestone inspection?
300.
300. And so the idea when setting the fee was to pay for any additional help that may be needed. Like if this does prove to be needing additional staff to do the milestone, then that money would go towards providing that service.
I'm looking at the fiscal impact note and it says $128,000 for salaries and benefits for
Yeah, that's-
environmental compliance inspector.
That's the
Is
old
that
one.
different? What do you mean the old one?
That's before all the amendments that were
Oh, so we
intended to.
need an updated?
Yes, and I think that's attached to the resolution and not.
Oh, wait a minute,
the,
there is an updated fiscal note. Okay.
That's the staff report,
Oh.
updated staff report.
It says updated fiscal impact.
I know, but it is, the
Ms. Ruth, did you
But
recall
it's a
the
staff report.
resolution number for the fee?
It's R1523.
All right, I'll look that up. Oh, it is on our agenda? It is on our agenda. Okay.
So I don't understand, why is that separate? Why is it not in,
Well, the fee has to be separate.
I know, but
but-
under fiscal
No, I
impact.
agree. I think the fiscal note needs to get updated for this legislation.
Yeah,
Can somebody mention that to finance to, I thought they did send me one, but I think I'm thinking of the resolution.
because it says updated fiscal impact note, but it's the staff report. It's not the
Yeah.
fiscal impact note.
So,
I
yeah,
saw it, so I know it exists.
yeah,
I just,
it does. So again, the idea was to scale back and then use the fee to provide for any supplemental inspections that are needed.
Okay, and what would the fee be, or do we not know that?
Be 300 per milestone. And so just to give you an example of the milestone inspection for a project like Rocky Gorge, because it's only gonna, the milestones are only on your larger projects. And this would give the department discretion to set as many milestone inspections as they want, because it varies per project, and that goes and gets approved by the Soil Conservation District. But an example of that would be, your first milestone would be, you go out to the site, you install that black fence, you see around the construction site. So after they install that, they have to get that accepted. And so even currently in the plans, it says that they're supposed to contract the inspector to do that. However, this makes it more formal in that, like we handle with all our other inspections, when you get an electrical inspection, you have to schedule it, you have to pay a fee. This puts a fee on these inspections. So when they install the black fence, they have to pay a fee to get the inspector out. And then that's going to go towards getting approval of what's installed. And then they may have another milestone later on. So before, Rocky Gorge, they have those big ponds that collect the dirt, the sediment. So another milestone might be before they have to get permission to take out those sediment traps. So that might be another milestone where they have to schedule with the department to get somebody out there.
So how does one know what the milestones are going to be?
well, thank you, that's right where I am. That's right where I am, and it's confusing because when you go to inspection frequency under 2, it says the applicant shall establish a milestone, which seems strange because when you go back,
Which one?
I'm on, the 170808B subsection 2, where it's talking about inspection frequency. It says the applicant shall establish a milestones, supplements, but when you go further back and you're talking about, where is it here?
Well, I can explain that.
Yeah, there's another part where it sounds like the department determines on projects whether there should be a set of milestones. So I'm
So-
trying to figure out who determines the milestone.
So who determines
Yes,
the
here it is.
milestones?
It's right below that in
Yeah.
2, under B, milestones shall be determined by the department at important phases of the construction. So B says the department, but 2 says the applicant establishes the milestones.
It's both. Okay, so the way the current plans, the way the process currently works as far as, so the applicant puts together the plan, right? The grading plan, staff doesn't put together the plan. The applicant proposes, in this case, they'll establish a milestone and schedule, but then it also allows, staff has a review, so that when staff reviews, they can make a comment that says, we want to modify that. We want to add more, remove some milestone inspections. And then that goes out to Conservation District, right, for approval. And
So where is this codified, this process?
in this new legislation.
But it's not clear step by step. Or is this clear to you guys? Because it's not clear to me.
It's clear to us where it is in the code. Cynthia, do you know where the?
You know, if
erosion
I were
and
going to
control-
develop something, how would I know exactly what steps I have to follow? And particularly as it relates to inspections of my project.
It's in the code somewhere, I just don't know the code.
Yeah, keep in mind there's two sections to this, right? You're looking at, the one section has to do with grading permits and inspections, and this talks about the fee, the permit notice, and those are things that are, so there are requirements on what the applicant has to include in the plans. That's the one question. Then the other question is how does staff handle the inspections?
And I understand, kind of.
Okay.
But where's the checklist that anybody could pick up and follow, knowing what the procedures are? Whether the milestones are set by me as the developer or by staff? How do I know that, other than having to read the code? I would think there's a checklist. And you know, you go through each phase and then you get to check off, you know, you determine how many milestones you want to predetermine and check them off as you, so where does one find that?
Well, it's in EnerGov, and we're going to formalize this process through EnerGov. It was on the paper applications, and some information is in the code. We're also working on updating our website so we can provide some more guidance on our website. There is information there as well.
Okay, so it can be found someplace.
Yes.
And you guys, I assume, would refer them to where they could locate it. Or you
Absolutely.
give it to them.
Yes.
Is this what Mr. Johnson was working on before he left? In part?
He was working on a procedure that I have been working on as well, like an inspection procedure with a fine schedule. I wanted to see how this was going to sort out because I think I need to know what the code says before I work on the procedure. So once we get this finalized, then I'll go back to the procedure, if that makes sense to everyone.
Okay, I just want us to be clear on what direction we're giving to both developer and staff.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it'd be helpful to add, so in this chapter 1708, it does list things that are required to be shown in the plans or on the plans. And so I'm wondering if it might help provide clarity if we just add an item in there that says one of the things they have to show on the plans are, and I think we already say sequence of construction, but maybe we can add to the line that says sequence of construction, add end milestone inspection schedule, if applicable, based on the code written later, because it's only going to apply to the large projects, right?
I think that's essentially the same thing. I think what we
Yeah.
can probably do is just make sure we're keeping a better eye on what their sequence of construction is and make sure that we're really reviewing and critiquing that to the level that we need to ensure that the inspection process makes the most sense for us.
Yeah, and I have another idea. Maybe would staff be able to maybe make an addendum to the staff report that just highlights bullets about here's the sequence, here's what would happen. You know, when somebody submits an application, if it's a project over, what would we say, an acre, I think, in size, then they would have to include a sequence of construction that includes milestone inspections. I'm just thinking something that might help the council better understand what this is going to look like. Yes.
So just so I understand, you're asking for us to outline the grading permit process, the grading permit submittal process.
Yeah, and you may have that already.
I think we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would be very easy for us to do, yeah.
Ms. Ruther?
So the amendment says the applicant shall establish a milestone inspection schedule that is supplemental to the requirements in the subsection to address critical phases of a project as reflected in the sequence of construction, which is what they work out with the Public
Yeah.
Works Department. Then it goes on to say the schedule must be approved by the department prior to grading permit approval. So basically, it has the developer work with Public Works to set that schedule, and this just tells that there has to be a milestone inspection, and this is what it is.
Yeah. Does that help?
I think so, but I'm not sure where the amendment is that you just read.
That is, it is in Part 2 of the amendment under Title 17, 1708-2020, go down to B.
Under inspection frequency?
Yeah, B2.
Okay, that's what we were reading previously about the milestone.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So I have two questions. The first one is, I think there's confusion because we're doing 1704 and 1708, but can a rainfall event create a new milestone?
No.
All right.
No.
So it just as we have a new definition we're taking care of in this legislation, and then, all right. So then, are we starting to confuse code with regulation? Because I think what Mr. Johnson was working on was an inspection process that was a department level rules and regs rather than city code. So I'm trying to make sure
Well,
that
it's-
we're not crossing.
It's a
over.
fine line because the sediment
It should be.
control,
They should be close. But I mean, one is rule and reg and the other's code.
well, keep in mind, the legislation not the legislation, the code we're modifying comes from the state model ordinance.
Okay.
That comes baked in with a lot of the information. We are adding information, and we did have a conversation about not to go too far into the rule writing realm, right?
Right.
And so, you know, I feel like we've got a good balance, but I may just be speaking as a sponsor. Do you feel like we're at a good place as far as not going too far with?
I do, and I just want to add that the milestone inspection is a newer idea, unless that was formally discussed, but I don't think it was, so.
Yeah. No, it was something that I think the code mentioned the word milestone, but it wasn't really utilized.
So I guess my last question is, I think I understand all of this, but I just heard you say, do we need to add something more? So do you think we're ready to have a recommendation that these amendments go to the council, or do we need one more crack with the department?
Well, my comment was just on providing clarity on the permit process. As far as, I think we can perhaps provide a concise summary showing when these milestones are going to be created and approved. And I think so that was I was more alluding to that. We also need to get the fiscal impact note clarified, but Mr. Ruther, when would this go to the council? If the committee moved on it today,
It's not going to be on the agenda for Monday.
No, it still has to go to another committee.
it went through Economic Matters last week.
And
So
they
this
were-
is the last committee.
Okay,
Yeah.
then, once you're done with it, then you'd go to the council.
But would it be this Monday or the next meeting?
That is up to you.
Okay, I mean, I think we should wait till the next meeting, not this Monday, but so first meeting in April, so we can get the updated fiscal note and updated staff report.
Did the other committee have the amendments?
Yes.
They didn't have any questions?
It's Economic Matters.
They're smarter than we are.
So that's.
Well, I say that just because there's not much of an economic impact.
So that sounds like a motion to postpone getting an updated fiscal impact. Is that where we are?
Well, no, I'd say if the committee's comfortable, I'd say my preference would be if we can get a recommendation from the committee and then we'll just make a recommendation that it go on the agenda at the first meeting in April so that we can get an updated staff report and fiscal note.
Okay, so would be recommend favorably to the city council for a vote, the first council meeting in April?
Yeah.
I would prefer that we see the fiscal impact.
Okay.
To be honest with you.
Okay.
Because I'm hearing a new staff person.
Well, I think, yeah, I heard that too.
Maybe that's
No.
not intended.
No?
No.
All right.
No, not a full-time. That's why I'm thinking likely consultant help, more on an as-needed basis.
But if you do a consultant, what's the time commitment? The cost may be different. But I would be more comfortable knowing.
That's fine. There's no rush on this. So I think that's something, I guess, if staff could contact the finance department, because those are some things that could be fleshed out in the finance report, finance impact statement. Yes?
So there was a mistake on my part. There is an updated fiscal impact note for 050, and that refers you to the fiscal impact note of R15, which is part of the agenda. That's the next one.
It's not attached to ours.
Okay, so would the committee entertain, I don't know if we can do this procedurally, but we could get a briefing on R1523, which is the fee schedule?
So the fiscal impact note attached to R15 doesn't talk about staffing impact. It talks about the $300 per inspection. I think that Alderwoman Finlayson, I'll put words in your mouth if you allow me, and I are concerned that we
Turn your mic on.
You might.
we don't come on, pass legislation that doesn't bring with it sufficient staff to make sure that the legislation is carried out. And looking at the fiscal impact note that's attached to the fee, it doesn't mention anything at all about additional staffing burden. And I think when we get our legislation in that requires a staffing burden report along with a fiscal impact and whatever it is the city manager is doing. So we get 3 reports on each piece of legislation. One would be what do we call
I think that'd be rolled into the fiscal impact note.
think the staff impact? No,
Yeah.
Well, okay, we'll see when we do the
I
legislation.
wrote it up as staffing impact statement.
Well,
Fiscal impact note.
so for the
Staffing
sake,
impact note, I guess, would be better.
for the sake of moving forward, I think that's reasonable to get more clarity on the fiscal impact note. I think we do need to get that updated, especially before it goes back to council. So do we want to postpone action pending updated fiscal impact note for 05522 that talks to the potential staffing needs, be it consultant or other?
Yeah, could you help explain this to me, because I'm sure it's just going to come back to me. So when I established the $300 fee, I assumed certain levels of effort for certain staff. That's how I came up with it.
Yeah.
I also assumed a certain over percentage based on hiring a consultant to do it, right? So then that's how I came up with the 300. But are you thinking that a consultant has to have a guaranteed amount of hours per week, and that can you just help explain where you're coming from a little bit so I know how to satisfy the request for the staffing burden. Am I not looking at it in the way that I should be? That's my question.
Are you directing that question?
I
I
hear
don't know.
both Alderwoman Finlayson and Alderman Arnett talking about the staffing burden. So I think I would just like some more clarity so I understand how to update the fiscal impact for you.
If you were going to, I don't want to say implement the milestones as it's outlined in the amendments, that may require you to do additional inspections. Do you currently have the capacity to do that?
No, but I will hire a consultant to do it for me.
Okay, so that consultant would cost us money,
Correct.
i.e. staff, whether it's contractual or permanent staff. So that's the cost I want to see, so that if we approve this ordinance, we know that along with it comes X number of dollars for either a new person or a contract person. Am I answering?
Yes, so
question you're
do you
in?
want to see it on an annual basis or not as per inspection?
I know
Okay.
you're gonna be guesstimating, because you don't know what the projects are, and you don't know how many inspections how many milestones you're gonna wanna do. So you're gonna have to give probably worst case scenario.
Okay.
I think I'd like to push back a little bit, just in the sense that, I guess as far as hiring a consultant, because the milestone inspections as currently listed in the sequence of construction is something the inspectors are already doing, right? Because it's set out for the initial inspection that the contractor is required to contact the department and contact the inspector to set up an inspection. So that's the first one's already happening, and I think the others that are happening. So I guess I'd like to better understand why you think they may need a contractor to help with that. Like how many? So if the first one's already being done, is it the other potential milestones that you think are going to take up more time in the inspectors?
Yes, it's less formal, so it occurs at the same time as our regular inspection, our regular bi-weekly inspection. So we talk to the contractor and see, okay, where are you and what are you planning next, right? So we understand where they are, but the process of calling in the inspection, scheduling it, and I'd imagine this as proposed, this would be in addition to that regular inspection. Am I understanding that correctly?
No, this would be, I think if they're already going out there I guess it would depend on the contractor, right? If you have your regular scheduled once every 2 week inspection, you're doing that on a schedule or based on rain event anyway, right? But if the contractor wants something quicker than that, I guess it would be above and beyond in the sense that they would have to go and schedule like they do in planning and zoning, right? Code enforcement, when they schedule something, they'd have to contact, I don't know exactly how that works, but they contact the department to schedule something with, and they say they can't proceed. So they're going to have to think ahead and say, we're going to schedule this with staff.
Mr. Chair, did I not hear you say that, or in reading the amendments, that they could add more milestone inspections?
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to understand.
On either side, on both sides, either the contractor or the staff. So, that's extra in my mind.
It is. I think you're correct, Alderman Savage, that there are times when we could probably do double up on the inspection, have it be the weekly and the milestone. But I don't know that we're always going to be that flexible to accommodate the milestone inspection and the urgency that the contractor might want us to.
Yeah. Right, I see what you're saying. So that's what you're trying to quantify with, what you have tried to quantify with the fiscal, with the fee, when you proposed the fee amount. So I guess to Alderwoman Finlayson was saying, I guess we can get a little more detail on that, because if they have a question, it's going to come up with the council too. So I think having something a bit more clear in the fiscal impact note would be helpful. So are you clear on the expectation or the request at this point?
I think so. I'm hoping finance
Okay.
will be able to help me with it. So I
Feel
think-
free to reach out
Okay.
to me if I try to help, if you have questions still. All right, so is there a motion?
I think the
Postpone?
motion is to postpone until we get more clarification on.
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And that's on 055. How about I think we should do the same thing with R1523, which is the fee schedule. Is there a motion to do the same?
Right, because what we heard is the setting of the fee was predicated on the staffing or contracting level.
Yeah,
So we want to make sure that we have both of those that we're comfortable with.
yeah.
I'll second.
So, I move postponing our 1523.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. And thank you, Ms. McKowen, for attending today.
Thank you.
I think it's really improved, the legislation, so that I think the changes were very helpful.
I do too. Thank you.
And again, it's really
May I
Yes.
ask her a question before she leaves? On something different? Witten Court,
Okay.
status,
I'm sure I know what you're speaking about. What can you be more
Witten
specific?
Court, off of Bywater Road. I know you have a ton of projects, just let me know.
Okay.
Thank you.
I assume someone in my department will be able to give you an update. Thank you.
Thank you.
all right. And we are going to close out with a presentation from Deputy City Manager Guild. Do you have any updates you would like to give us today? There's no wire. No wonder it wasn't working on you.
Jackie Guile, Deputy City Manager of Resilience and Sustainability. In the interest of time, I'm not going to cover everything that we're doing. I just will say that with regard to what Ms. McEwen, some of her projects, the Chesapeake Bay Trust, of course, administers grants that the city funds. And we're entering that next cycle. So the projects were proposed and applications were submitted between January and February, and the trust is getting ready to go over the 5 projects that were proposed with city staff and make some decisions on what we will fund. We have $300,000 in that fund to fund projects that could all go to one project. We can divvy it up among the 5 projects. So I was just sent that list 2 days ago, and I need to review that and see what those projects are. But the trust has already scheduled time to speak with us about, and so it is a joint decision-making process between the city and the trust about what projects we think will make best use of the city's funds in that regard.
Are these the WIP projects?
No.
No,
This
okay.
is a whole separate pot of money. This is fund. This is the Anne Arundel County Restoration Fund. It's called Anne Arundel County. Anne Arundel County has their pot of money and their projects that go into it, and the city has a separate pot. So they don't take money from us and we don't take money from them. It's just, we're part of the county. That's why we fall within that grant program. The trust helps select the projects, they manage them, they vet them, but the city has input into it, and it's our funds from our Watershed Restoration Fund that go into this program. Okay.
How long has it been accumulating to get to, what did you say, 300,000?
It's not, so this particular fund is not accumulating. It's coming directly from our watershed restoration fund that some people call it the rain tax that the city administers.
So it's a one-time, I mean, it's an
So
annual
what we contribute
pot.
is annual. We started this 2 years, this will be the third year. And at that time, Director Johnson authorized $300,000 to be transferred to the trust, and it has its own line item in our, with the Department of Finance. There's a number assigned to it that's for this purpose, that is. And then it was successful in the first year. I think we funded 3 projects or 4 projects, and then last year we funded, I believe, 5. This is the third year. We have not increased the amount of money that's gone into it at all, as of yet. The city does not receive, have the number that the county, number of projects applied for or administered that the county does, of course. So we think so far that $300,000 is an appropriate sum of money to be putting into this fund for projects.
So does that amount change?
It has not changed.
It's been the same?
It has
all
been
3
the same
years.
for 3 years. Last year, well, every year we have spent all of the money. Last year, there was a project that was awarded that in the end, the recipient could not agree to accept because of the parameters of the project changed on them, because of various aspects of the site that they looked into further, and we could not come to agreement with the trust on what the parameters of the project should be, so they sent the money back to us. And so there was a little bit more money this year for grant administration. We didn't use it all last year. We had it allocated, but it was not used.
So is it used on private properties?
It can be used on private property. Most of the time, the projects are, let me take that back. It has actually been mostly private property. It could be any combination of private and public. It could be a nonprofit's property, that is, or a church property, which would be a private property if it's a church property, of course. But there's, for example, we had Nautilus Point this year submit an application, and they don't have stormwater controls at Nautilus Point, and so they were submitting a design concept to have a design grant to identify where they can put in stormwater controls and what they would cost, so that their next application, which this is one that was awarded last year for design, could be for construction. So I've not looked at the list myself yet, but I'm assuming that they put in for construction this year since we have awarded design. The county only awards project monies for shovel-ready projects, construction projects. The city will fund assessment projects and design and conceptual projects as well as construction projects. So it really aids the public works to get more projects going. What happens, the reason why we choose to fund design and conceptual projects is that applicants can apply to the Department of Natural Resource for construction projects. They want construction projects. So if we tee them up with design projects, then the applicant can next go to Department of Natural Resources rather than back to the city for construction funds, which in some cases would be maybe exceed what we even have in our pot to give out.
And who sets the standards for the city?
For the actual review requirements, the Chesapeake Bay Trust has a list of review, a process for reviewing.
So it's the Chesapeake Trust?
Yes,
that
they
sets
manage,
standard.
there are basically like a manager of the funds. So they vet the projects and make sure that the criteria are met and the project meets its criteria for what they deem worthwhile, a worthwhile expenditure of the funds, that is.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Learn something new every day.
Yes, Alderman Burnett.
So I feel like I'm out of date. I thought we had a spreadsheet a while ago that went through our whole portfolio of things like where are we on the WIP and our meeting our TMDLs and all the other things that I thought were on the spreadsheet. This is something separate, but still part of our resiliency and sustainability.
So when we made different moves between the Office of Environmental Policy and the Deputy City Manager position, the WIP became exclusively part of Public Works. But prior to that, the environmental programs coordinator had some responsibilities in the TMDL program with regard to our MS4 permit. But since that time, she is more involved just with, she goes, Ms. Hodo will go on site visits. She is involved with this program with the Chesapeake Bay Trust. She is a contact for site evaluations by nonprofits when they come to the city. She's included in the Public Works visits. So still involved, but we don't have direct responsibility anymore for stream restoration projects. So Ms. McEwen's position was actually created because we needed a project manager, even in Public Works, for that responsibility for stream restoration and meeting our MS4 permit. So now she has that program manager responsibility, and the stormwater engineers are working in concert with her, and then the environmental programs coordinator works with me, stays involved to keep abreast of information, provide advice and guidance, and be the liaison to the Annapolis Environmental Commission on these projects.
So this concerns me. I guess it had escaped me that the WIP program was going over to Public Works, but I still would like an update. And getting these spreadsheets, like the project spreadsheets from planning and zoning, getting an update on WIP, getting an update on other things, getting an update on the pollinator park and water access plans and the AC priorities is different. But there's a whole portfolio of resiliency and sustainability, environmental things that are going on, but we come in contact once a month or whenever there's legislation, and I can't believe that that there aren't other people interested in the environment that also only see it or come to it every once in a while. I think we need some kind of a plan where this committee is getting an across-the-board status report at least once a month from planning and zoning, from Public Works, from wherever, so we can stay on top of what's going on.
So there is a spreadsheet that I prepare that did go to this committee last month, and I have Ms. Hodo update it for me monthly. I know we were canceled last week, so I think the last time it was updated was in February, but it is to be updated monthly. We didn't have any significant updates for it. I have to double check for you. I believe we do have something about stormwater projects on it still, because we do have that liaison with Department of Public Works. Also, when there are issues with stormwater projects or stormwater runoff at development sites, other locations, I am involved with that, as you know, and I'm heavily involved with Parkside Preserve and other development projects and stream restoration projects that may have some difficulties, such as St. Luke's, for example. So I still am involved with those and work very closely with Department of Public Works, but they are the managers of those programs.
But the reason we have the committee structure that we have for the council, which past city administrators didn't necessarily agree with, but is so that we can take a deep dive into environmental matters. And our colleagues, the rest of the council and the mayor rely on us to be staying on top of it and report to them things that are noteworthy, so that all of us don't have to do every one of the committee's work. So I guess my plea to you, Mr. Chair, and to you, Deputy City Manager, is that we start getting these reports, even if nothing's new, just for me, just to get a gander beforehand and satisfy myself that things are chugging along the way they are, but to get that across the board sort of vision of all of the things that we're into would be my plea, request, whatever. We're on this committee because we care about the environment, but I think we have other colleagues that do too, and they're depending upon us to keep them up to date.
So one thing that I had done in the past, but we will go back to doing, is I can provide that spreadsheet with all those updates directly to each of you. rather than just to the city clerk and to the Office of Law. That way, I know that you're directly getting it. I know how many emails you receive every day, and it may rise to the top for you of your list. Would that be helpful?
That would be very helpful.
Okay.
So we will keep this on the agenda. This meeting today, I wanted to focus on a plastic bag and legislation, but we'll certainly add that to the next agenda. So we'll get a discussion about overall environmental programs. The discussion about the WIP, I think we'll need to give Ms. McEwen a heads up on that. She did present to us maybe a year ago with last year's budget, I think.
She did. It wasn't quite a year ago. She gave an overview of the program and where the city is in accomplishing its goals. And we were ahead in accomplishing our goals.
And that's good to get, I think, associated with the budget.
To this committee, how many people saw Eric Lashinsky's update on the water access plan, which I thought was excellent and very informative, and I think the city's doing a really good job. But so the list that we have from AEC is a pretty good list of things that we want to stay on top of. That water access plan.
Back there. That
which,
just came out this week, didn't it? Did he just send it recently?
He may, well, no, I think he sent us the comp plan. I think the watershed was last month. And it was a very good presentation and gratifying because we're doing a lot of good things. And we have some good external partners like Wendy O'Sullivan from National Parks and things like that. So sometimes I don't think we stop and take a breath and recognize all of the good things the city is doing that are, quite valuable.
The watershed access plan is not quite finished. So Eric that will be fit, I think within the next couple of months it will be finished. It also has another component that you'll be able to go online and see all of the water access points. And the intent is that also when you click on a point, it will show you what is there. So you'll get a visual picture as well as what amenities are there. Is it a kayak launch? Is it a boat ramp? Is it a boat and kayak launch? We don't have any swimming points, but that would be one if we allowed swimming. Is it a fishing pier, et cetera? So it'll be something that will complement and could be also overlaid over our parks plan on our parks information.
But we have Hawkins Cove. We have a recent judicial decision on Wells Cove, and I'm kind of interested how the Office of Law is reacting to that. But the judge did say that that is not access coming up to the water, but access to get on the water.
On the water.
As the legislation said back in the 80s when it was passed, and I thought was pretty clear that it was water access. But I think this committee should be the one that gets the update on where we're going with that. The judge handed down a finding. Is the city appealing that?
So I'd like to add this to a future agenda.
Yeah.
We are starting to get a little late here. I do want to get a briefing on that. So how about we'll tentatively put that on the next committee agenda, depending on how much legislation we have, to get an update on that.
Okay.
That sound good? We can invite Mr. Lashinsky, and the law office will have time to get briefed on the latest on that. Sound good? Okay. Anything else? Ms. Colton, did you have anything else from the commission? Okay. Anything else from the committee? Go to the order?
Yep.
I take it you would like a motion to adjourn?
I would.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.